So today we are going to be looking into some upgrades for the previous chunk loading line that I did show on my channel here. This was quite some time ago, but we did need to make some adjustments to ours in AutoCraftSMP right now. Because this chunk loading line in the nether for us for another mob switch is like over 1,000 blocks long. Having that many chunks loaded all the time is not ideal. So we wanted to make some adjustments to it and make it a bit more lag efficient than it used to be, which is what this version 2 of it is. Now, a very big thing we wanted to keep, of course, is the use of the same chunk loader. That way we don't need to really go to all 70, 80 chunk loaders just for the nether side here and change them all out, or either redo them or make some adjustments to it. The whole goal was to make it as simple as an upgrade as possible, but also being extremely beneficial. The main difference is really all down to where this redstone block is placed and the actual redstone line here. This used to be either all redstone dust or powered rails. Now there are some minor adjustments to it, mainly to make it more reliable. Now, this does mean it's not much faster than the old line, unfortunately, but it is extremely reliable and lag efficient because the chunks to go towards the final destination are not always loaded. So yeah, for this quick demonstration purpose, we have the nether side, which is the bottom here, indicated by the netherrack. And then on the top is the overworld return side. Only main difference for the overworld is instead of using a chunk loader inside your spawn chunks, we are using the frosted ice detection with the armor stand and stuff like that. Everything else for the overworld side is the same. Obviously, these are not connected to one another because they are probably close to 200 blocks, 300 blocks away in the overworld, because there's 8 blocks for every block in the nether. And these chunk loaders are 1 block apart, so do the math there. That's how far apart the overworld part of the chunk loading line is from each one of these. Obviously, this is just for demonstration purposes. These are not like this, that close together normally, because we're in the overworld. This has to be like how it is. So we will go check it out in AutoCraftSMP, where we actually have this fully built up and see it working in action. But just for the demonstration here, I wanted to show it in the creative so that we can actually see what's going on a bit more easier. Over to the first thing we changed is now we do have the frosted ice detection here. The main improvement of this is not going to be constantly loaded either. Doesn't make a difference because the spawn chunks are always loaded if you are in Java. Bedrock, this will not work, obviously, for multiple reasons. So this was a design that I saw from Dark. They used it in their moss bone meal farm. They used this feature to make their system unload proof in some way, but it is very useful for us. Now, if we place this in the spawn chunks, obviously once the server or your single player world starts up, this will automatically get loaded, provided you don't have Optifine disabling your spawn chunk. This right here will generate a frosted ice when you load it for the first time. And then obviously this is thick piston is budded, so once that ice block forms, it will update that, and then we will get a signal from here, which will dispense an item through a portal. Imagine this as a portal, just for demonstration purposes. That one gets sent through, and then it would come through the other side here, where it would then be picked up and detected with this comparator, which would start the whole sequence here. A main improvement for the line is also that it will automatically turn on the end switch there, regardless of if the switch is either in its on state or off state, which is very important for our use case that we wanted to have it for. This would allow me to do that without needing me to go into the server and then turn the mob switches on manually. So that's the main improvement of this feature here. So that's what this whole system was kind of designed to do for us. We'll also see in SMP here, we will have another area on this side of the nether that would go to our overworlds, which was just in this direction over here. Which you can actually do that if you wanted to as well. I do also plan to chain it to our main storage for the item shadowing area. That way we don't need to go to main storage either after each restart to load that. All the system really does is take the one pulse, make it a quick pulse, and then this down here is just the logic to remember if it's in the switch at the end here is in the on or off state. Because if it's in the off state, we only want to send one signal down. That way the switch will then turn on. If we have it in the on state, obviously the first signal that goes down would turn it off. So we need to send 2 of them so that it'll go off and then back on. So that way the switch is always active no matter what upon a server restart, which is mainly what you would want for a mob switch. And then of course you have your manual line, which you could then hook up to your nether hub or stuff like that, so that you can go back to manually turning off and on the mob switch if you needed to run a farm, for example. Because obviously the automatic detection we have up here is only to turn on the switch once the server is active or you log into your single player world, which can be very, very useful. And then we just chain it down this line here. This used to be all Rails, my version 2.1 of this, because that is what I thought would work. Unfortunately, when we did test it on stream, you could see that the redstone obviously is 1 chunk more than the entity processing chunks. So we could see that the item was dispensed here, but it wasn't loaded. It was basically lazy loaded. So with this particular chunk loader, we needed to add these repeater delays in between each of the individual chunk loaded modules, unfortunately. And then we have, obviously, we need to send 2 pulses. We need to send 1 to go down, 1 to go back up, which is what this delay circuit here is for, 1 tick and 3 ticks to do that. So that way we, no matter what, will relock the chunk loader, disable this individual chunk loader after about 30 seconds of it being activated, which means the whole chunk loading line will not be active while the switch is active, which is what you want, because this line stretched over thousands of blocks will quickly rack up the amount of chunks that you have loaded, because it is obviously a 3x3 chunk area around this portal, and that does tend to add up over 1,000 of blocks. So yeah, the whole main goal of that was to make it send the signal through, and then once it was done, send the signal through a certain part of the system, it would then turn itself off, then loaded less chunks over time. So now we're going to simulate the system in action here. We turn the mob switch off here, so this we should only see 1 signal go down here. We're going to simulate that by placing an item inside that hopper over there. You can see the signal being transferred down here, and then the items being shot through the portals. It is not the fastest of systems. There is definitely faster chunk loading lines, but for the simplicity of this, there's no boats, there's no item alignment, there's no instant wires, there's nothing like that. So I guess it is slow, but it is very simple to do. So you can see the redstone is fairly simple to do compared to some other chunk loading lines that you have probably seen. But that's all depending on what you want. If you want to have it instant and faster, definitely use those other chunk loading lines. If you want the simplicity of it, I would recommend this. If you're going over thousands and thousands of blocks, yes, it will take some time to reach the end of the line, but I think it's worth it in terms of how much build effort you need to do for this. So yeah, now that it's in its on state, indicated by this lamp here, and that one being down at the end of the line, we're going to simulate this by putting another item into here, and we should see 2 signals go down. So now we have 2 signals going down here. We should see this go up and back down, which will now keep this chunk loader active again. And obviously you would lazy load your switch at the end here. That way they don't cause a lot of lag. So that's that for the chunk loading line. Obviously the return is still the same as the past one. Very simple. It just detects an item coming through and then sends it back to the original loader, therefore recycling the item, so you don't ever need to restock these chunk loading lines ever. So yeah, all in all, very happy with how this line turned out in terms of its simplicity, while keeping the other chunk loader completely as it was before. So if you built my previous chunk loading line, the only adaptations you're making is with this redstone down here and the original detection of the server or single player world being active, which is not too bad at all, especially for the overworld side. It's much more simplified. Now that we have everything explained in the test world, to basically show it off, what we will now do is now we will go to the SMP. I will restart the server. That way we can actually see the line being loaded. We'll also turn off spectator generated chunks. That way we can actually see the chunks loading after the next one and the next one and so on, all the way down the 1,000 blocks line. Obviously we're going to time lapse that. It's around 5 to 6 minutes or so for it to reach the end of our current line, which is not terrible, but it's obviously not as fast as it could be. Like I said, it's all depends on how you want it to be, and the simplicity of making the chunk load inline, I think is well worth it for us. Alright, so we are relaunching the server right now, and it should be back up and running. I'm gonna wait just a few seconds to load in to make sure, or to show that the actual chunk loaders will kick on by themselves, which we won't be able to see, unfortunately, just because of how the server starts. As you can see here, we already have the first ones underway. We have the pulses going underway. This is just loaded because of where I logged out of the server and I had my render distance too high, so these are still loaded, unfortunately. But as you can see, it is still working. We have the 2 pulses going down. That is because the switch was in the on state when we shut down the server. So now we need to send 2 pulses because the first one will turn the switch off, the second one will turn it back on, and they are spaced far enough in between each other where they will not interfere and only combine into one signal and can stay at 2. So as you can see here, we're already at around 400 blocks or so from the main nether hub, which is where obviously the spawn is. And we need to go to right about 1100 or so for it to go. So I will be here, and we will just see this time lapse until we reach the end where the mob switch will turn on automatically for us. Alright, so as you saw at the very end there was a little bit of a mishap with the last 4 or so chunk loaders. For whatever reason, it did not activate correctly. I will have to make sure that those are fixed in the end, because obviously we want this to actually work correctly for us. Whether that's added more delay we'll have to do, I don't know. This works for the first 1,000 blocks, and as you saw there, then it just started to slow down and then completely malfunction. So I will go check that. But yeah, as you can see, the switch, or as we did, reached all the way down to the end there. Yep, see right here is where you can see the signals collided into one. So this one remained active. So we need to check out this here, because obviously that should not be the case. So I'll fix that as soon as I can in SMP. So of course, if you were to access this schematic, make sure that you do get the updated version once I have this fixed, if you are going to stretch it more than 1,000 bucks. As you can see, all of these are now done, and they're in the off state here, which is good. And we have both of these switches active, indicated by the lamps down there. So yep, that is everything for this chunk loading line. Like I said, if you want to get access to the schematic, it's basically the same as my previous one. All that really changes is the logic for the auto start on with this new frosted ice detector, and then a bit of logic to here where if you want to get access to both of these, I will have the schematic for this as well. I will include the first couple attached to here, as well as the one to our overworld mob switch if you want to use that as well. As you can see, it's a little bit different, on the overworld side compared to the nether side, but they do function and serve the same purpose. Only difference you will have is where your overworld switch and your nether switch are located, so that will be something you have to make as little small adjustments for, but it is very simple to do with just some powered rail and observer lines to the destination. That's gonna do for this episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, all sorts of things, and I'll see you in the next one.